My name is Gabriella Moore. I am 34 years old and currently serve as the chief financial officer of a major hotel group based in New York. I spent my youth working to prove my value within my own family, a place where promises were plentiful but recognition was always a luxury. That evening was meant to be the brightest moment of my career. The company's 50th anniversary, hundreds of guests, major investors, the press, and me about to step onto the stage to speak about our upcoming financial strategy. But then, amid the stage lights and formal music, a single text from my mother made my legs go weak. Your grandfather has been admitted to the hospital. It's critical. Come home now. I dropped the microphone, left everything behind, and sped to the hospital in the wail of a taxi horn. But when the hospital room door opened, he was sitting there, perfectly well, sipping tea and reading the evening paper. At that moment my phone started buzzing nonstop. I stared at the screen and went numb. The live broadcast in the ballroom showed my parents announcing Andrew, my brother, as the new CEO of the group, the position they had promised to me. It was all a perfect con. Have you ever been pulled down into a pit of betrayal by your own family just when you thought you were about to reach the top? If you felt the sting of being knocked down by your own blood, leave a comment below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe justice should be reclaimed, not begged for. As for me, I didn't cry. I didn't collapse. Immediately after, I began to plan to take back everything, in a way no one could have expected. Stay tuned because what comes next will shock you even more. I looked at my grandfather, Harold Moore, who sat there, thin but alert, his face showing clear bewilderment when he saw me at the hospital door, near tears. Gabriella? Why are you here? Is something wrong? I didn't answer right away. I stood there in the black evening gown made for the anniversary, high heels tracked with hallway dust, makeup smudged from tears and sweat. My body was shaking not from the cold but from the coiled rage in my chest. I thought that you were critical, I whispered. He folded down the paper, set his glasses aside, and his expression turned to confusion. Critical? The doctor just measured my blood pressure. Everything's fine. Why would you think that? I sank into a plastic chair in the corner, pulled out my phone and opened the message from my mother. I didn't need to say a word. He only needed to read that line to understand. A few seconds passed. Then his old eyes narrowed. He placed his hand on his knee and exhaled slowly as if his chest had been squeezed. Elena sent you that? I nodded. And you left the New York event to come here? For you, I said through clenched teeth. I thought you needed me. But actually, they just wanted me out of the room so they could hand that seat to Andrew. In person. In front of all the investors. My grandfather closed his eyes, one hand trembling over his chest. He didn't speak for a long time. I couldn't tell whether he felt pain or shame. Maybe both. Gabriella, he whispered, I should have seen this sooner. I dug my nails into my palm until they hurt. How long? I asked. How long have they been cutting me out of every plan? He looked at me, his gaze heavy with deep sadness. I'm not even sure. Maybe, since Andrew came back from California. Since Dean told me the boy was grown and ready to share the burden. I thought they only wanted to lend a hand. But then, there were board minutes I wasn't invited to, decisions signed while I was on that cardiac treatment trip in Florida. Thought I was getting old. That they would carry on what I built. But I was wrong. I closed my eyes, holding back a rush of tears. The hurt wasn't only from being deceived. It was the sensation that a lifetime of work could be dismissed in a matter of minutes. I never asked for special treatment, I only wanted to be recognized. And they stole even that. I opened the business news app on my phone. Prominently displayed was a photo of my mother, my father, and Andrew on stage at the Waldorf Astoria. The headline in bold read, Andrew Moore, new CEO of Moore Legacy Resorts. A young, bold, innovative heir. I turned the screen toward my grandfather. He stared at it. The way his eyes lingered on Andrew's smug smile, my father's clenched hand, and my mother raising a champagne glass choked me. They told me you were too busy to attend the celebration, he said slowly. That you declined because of a business trip overseas. I let out a dry, bitter laugh that had none of amusement in it. And they told you I was lying on my deathbed. He shook his head, the expression lowering. I used to believe family wouldn't betray one another like that. I stopped believing that a long time ago, I said. My grandfather looked at me for a long time, Then his voice deepened. I'm sorry. I shook my head. You don't have to apologize. But you need to tell me, what have they done with my share of the company? And what do you still have? He didn't answer immediately. He pulled a ring of keys from his bedside drawer and nodded toward the old safe in the corner. In there are the original records I kept from the company's early days. The shareholder agreements, trust authorizations, and a few documents they thought I no longer had. Gabrielle, if you still want to fight, I'll give you everything. I walked to the safe, my hand trembling as I fitted the key. The metal door creaked open. Inside sat a wooden box worn by years. I lifted it onto the bed. He nodded. Take it and read carefully. But Gabriella, if you truly intend to confront them, be prepared to not be considered family anymore. They won't go easy. I squeezed the box strap. They never treated me like family, Grandpa. I was a tool, a shield, a backup plan if Andrew failed. His eyes filled with regret. That's my fault. I was blind. I stepped closer and placed my hand on his shoulder. But you were the first to believe that I could do something great. I won't let you down. He smiled softly. For the first time since I arrived, that smile wasn't forced. My little girl has learned how to fight, he murmured. I rose, clutching the wooden box to my chest, and walked down the hospital corridor into the cold night. When the door closed behind me, there were no tears and no panic. Only one thing remained, the will to reclaim everything that belonged to me and more. I dialed the only relative I trusted. Emily. Gabriella? Oh my God, where are you? I saw you disappear from the ceremony and then the news about Andrew being named CO. Are you free? I need you to read some documents. Maybe help draft a complaint. Silence for a few seconds on the line. My cousin used to be a federal prosecutor. Come to my office. We'll start tonight. I hung up and hurried into the New York darkness. Not to run away. To begin. I left the hospital in the late night, the city still ablaze as if it never sleeps. The wooden box felt lighter than I expected but heavier on my chest. I didn't go straight to Emily's office. I took a taxi back to my small midtown apartment to collect myself, to sort out thoughts, and to face the pain I had kept buried for years. Sitting alone in the quiet kitchen, I sifted through the papers in the wooden box. Dust-covered documents, signatures that were familiar yet distant. I found an internal memo from 10 years earlier, the year I finished my MBA. The faded line read, "Recommendation to appoint Gabriella Moore as Assistant Regional Finance Director for the Northeast." My father had crossed it out and scribbled in short handwriting, "Andrew will replace her." 10 years ago I sat and waited a full week for the official answer. They said nothing. They were silent until I understood on my own that I had been passed over. I leaned back in the chair, my head resting on the cold wooden back. Memories unfolded like a reversing film. I remember that winter. I was juggling 2 jobs. Daytime at the front desk of a luxury hotel, nights delivering food to pay my final semester tuition. Meanwhile, Andrew posted photos from across Europe. He sat on a yacht in Venice, sipped red wine in Bordeaux, and strummed a guitar in a Spanish plaza. In the captions he thanked our parents for a break to find inspiration. I stayed silent. I told myself, they might treat me differently, but if I become good enough, they will see me. I remember graduating with my MBA. My parents didn't come. They said they were busy driving Andrew to an interview in San Francisco. Only my grandfather showed up, holding a bouquet of yellow tulips he mistook for sunflowers. I laughed, tears in my eyes, watching him stand in the row of seats, awkward and trembling to hold flowers. Only him. I believed that if I kept working hard and poured everything into the company, one day they would trust me. So I didn't mind business trips, late meetings, or rewriting reports 3 times because my father said the tone wasn't sharp enough. I was promised the Miami branch last year. They told me to prepare the development strategy, work with local investors, and plan management recruitment. I spent 6 months in Florida's humid heat with no weekends off. I found strategic partners, secured agreements with 3 major distributors, and even convinced the local authorities to expedite building permits. 3 days before the grand opening, I received a single email from my father. It read simply, "Andrew will represent the executive team at the Miami opening. Thank you for your contributions." That was it. I spent that afternoon sitting in an empty conference room with the lights off, the blinds drawn, staring at the distant sea where my dream had been. Then I kept working. Because I thought giving up would mean they win. I sat there, my hand brushing an old photo of Andrew and me in front of my grandfather's first hotel in Atlanta. I was 14, Andrew was 10. I wore a plain black dress. He had on an oversized tie and was standing on a brick to seem taller than me. Back then everything was innocent. I didn't yet understand power, legacy, or what the Moore name carried. I only remembered my grandfather saying, "This company will be a place for you to keep, not for money, but for the people who work under this roof." So what now? Andrew was presented to the press as the promising new CEO. Meanwhile, I, who had built nearly the entire finance system and sustainable development plan over a decade, was pushed aside with a fake text about my grandfather's health. They wanted me gone so there would be no complications. I stared at the ceiling, feeling like I had swallowed ice. It wasn't just injustice. It was humiliation because I had hoped they would change. My phone rang. Emily called. "You okay?" "Okay for now. Can you look over my grandfather's files?" "Of course. I'm ready. My cousin will come after breakfast tomorrow. Be there early, we have a lot to do." I glanced at the clock. It was 3 a.m. Outside, taxis and lit windows showed a city that doesn't sleep. Neither would I. I stood, walked to the bookcase, and opened the hidden compartment where I kept copies of documents I'd gathered during my work. Altered meeting minutes, contracts with contractors I never approved, payroll sheets showing consulting fees paid to Andrew for 2 years while he hadn't attended a single meeting. I packed everything into a bag, tucked the wooden box from my grandfather under my arm, pulled on a coat and stepped out the door. The night sky lay heavy and black. Inside me, a small flame had been lit, a steady, enduring spark enough to keep me going for what was coming. The air was still when I stepped into the small office building where Emily worked. There was no receptionist, no buzzer. Just an old wooden-floored corridor, walls hung with a few diplomas and family photos. Emily opened the door the moment I knocked, her face still bearing the signs of a sleepless night. "Come in. Colin's waiting in the conference room," she said softly, taking the cardboard box from my hands. Colin is Emily's cousin, a lawyer who specializes in corporate work and internal disputes. He is a salt and pepper man in a dark shirt, seated at a laptop with black-rimmed glasses, carefully scanning the pages I had brought. He gave a slight nod when I stepped in. "Gabriella, right? I skimmed a few things in the box. If everything is as you say, this isn't just fraud. There could be criminal elements." I pulled a chair up opposite him. Emily sat beside me and opened another stack of documents she had printed from the files I sent last night. "Start wherever you want," I said, my voice a little hoarse. "I need to know what they've been doing behind my back, and how to take back what's mine." Colin placed a hand on the pile of documents. "My sister used to work at the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission. What you've brought could trigger an investigation into Moore Legacy's leadership, if properly authenticated and submitted to the right authorities." He drew out a thin packet and flipped through the pages. "Here are board minutes that show signs of tampering. Some signatures look like scanned copies pasted in. There's no original ink." Emily added, "Also, some of the meeting dates don't line up with Harold's travel schedule. That means he wasn't present to sign, but his name still appears on the documents." I swallowed hard. "They used my grandfather's name to approve illegal transfers?" Colin nodded and turned to another file. "And here is the trust account statement in your name. $3 million moved out of the fund over the past 8 months, in transfers kept under $250,000 each to avoid automatic red flags." I lowered my head, my hands gripping the edge of the table. "That money was supposed to be for my private investment fund," I said quietly. "Grandpa set it up for me to develop new branches. A sum for me to control, not the board." Emily frowned. "The money was routed to another fund under Andrew's name, but it went through 2 intermediaries, a consulting firm and a law office in Nevada, essentially a shell structure. And the personal investment," Colin continued, "is declared as development research in the Caribbean, but in reality they bought a beachfront villa and a yacht called Gabriella's Grace." I laughed, not out of humor but from bitterness. "They used my money to buy a yacht, then named it after me. They're creative," I said. Emily placed her hand on my wrist, her expression softening. "We won't let this slide." Colin nodded. I've contacted a friend who does internal investigations. You'll need to give me everything you have on the account structure. Any internal emails, the budget allocation history, and anyone who worked directly with you on projects that were interfered with. I thought immediately of Monica, the Boston branch finance manager who had quietly flagged a strategic consulting fee that Andrew signed off on without passing it through the accounting department. I'll call her. She's reliable, I said. Colin made a note. Good. The more internal witnesses, the easier it will be to show this wasn't an accounting error but a deliberate scheme. I sat in silence for a long time, staring at the pile of papers. The outlines of the picture they had secretly built over years came into clearer focus. I asked, and my grandfather? Does his share have enough weight to change the board? Emily looked at me and nodded slowly. He directly holds 37% of the shares, plus another 8% through his late wife's trust. That portion hasn't been transferred. If he stands with you, we have a chance to turn the board. Colin added, but if they convince the board that Harold lacks capacity, everything can be frozen. They may be preparing paperwork to declare him administratively incapacitated. I remembered a line my grandfather had said at the hospital when he handed me the key. I'm not sure how much time I have left, but at least, I'm clear enough to choose who will protect what I built. I lifted my head, my voice firm. Then we act before they can. Emily nodded. I'll prepare a new power of attorney, naming you as the sole legal representative. Colin will draft an accompanying certificate of cognitive capacity signed by an independent physician. Colin turned his laptop screen toward me. And here is the Cayman Islands account where they moved part of the money. If you look closely, there's a repayment from a company called Alta Keys Holdings. But the ultimate recipient is Dean Moore, not a corporate entity. I read my father's name and felt my chest tighten. My father sold company assets and put the money into a private account? I asked. Colin exhaled. And if uncovered, he'll claim it was an internal accounting mistake. But with clear evidence, this is embezzlement. I stood and walked to the window, looking down at the streets beginning to stir. People hurried off to work, unaware that only a few stories above, a family was attempting to swallow someone else's life's work with calculated smiles. When I turned back, my eyes were different. Emily, set up an appointment with my grandfather for this afternoon. I want him to see what my parents and brother have done with his own eyes. If he still believes we won't stand alone. Emily nodded and quickly pulled out her phone. Colin began drafting the complaint to submit to the oversight board. I looked at the documents in front of me and thought about the $3 million that had been taken from me as if it were a debt that had never existed. But it exists. And I will get every dollar back. That afternoon I drove out to my grandfather's house in the northern suburbs, carrying a file Colin and Emily had carefully annotated. Wind rustled the maples along the gate, yellow leaves blanketed the stone path, and my footsteps sounded loud in the solemn stillness of the afternoon. Harold sat on a lounge chair on the porch, a wool blanket over his knees and a book left open in his hands. He looked up when the wood door closed and his eyes found mine, calm but heavier than before. You're here, he said softly. I sat beside him and handed over the file. I brought what I thought you needed to see. He set the book on the tea table and removed his reading glasses. Tell me, Gabriella. I turned the pages, my voice steady. They have a plan to push you out of whatever remains on the board. And to do it, they intend to claim you are administratively incapacitated. He leaned back with his eyes closed for a moment as if absorbing each word. It wasn't surprise, perhaps he had suspected, but an acceptance of a harsher truth than he had imagined. Dean intends to have his own father declared unfit? I asked. Not a psych ward. They'll hire a psychiatrist to testify. There's a draft statement saying you show signs of memory decline and have made inconsistent decisions over the past year. They'll use your treatment trip in Florida as evidence. He gave a thin, cold laugh, eyes hard as winter wind. And Andrew is behind it? I nodded. I turned to the next packet. I found a copy of the insurance payout for a car accident in April. Officially, the driver is listed as a trial employee, but traffic camera footage clearly shows Andrew driving. The victim suffered broken ribs and head trauma. Hospital bills were paid from company funds. They used company assets to cover Andrew's mistakes, I said. Not only that. They created a shell company to route the settlement funds, and coded the payments as extra legal adjustments under operating expenses. He fell into a long silence. His face seemed to sink deeper into its wrinkles. Then he looked at me. "I always thought you could do more than they expected," he said. "But I was wrong to assume blood would not dry up so quickly." I spoke softly. "You still have time to protect what you built. But if we don't act now, they will push you from the empire you built." He didn't look at me. He gazed toward the horizon where the light was fading behind the trees. I gave him space to sit with his thoughts. I understood that the feeling was heavier than anger, the sting of betrayal by his own child. At last he nodded slowly. "I will sign. Full medical, financial, and share power to you. I will transfer them to you." I pulled the packet Emily had prepared from my bag. "I have all the legal drafts ready. Colin also arranged for an independent physician to assess you this afternoon, so no one can claim you were coerced." He took the pen, his hand slightly shaky, but the signature came out bold and decisive. "You will not be able to return to being one of the family," he said in an even tone, as if pronouncing a verdict. I looked him straight in the eye. "I was never truly inside their circle, Grandpa. Since I chose to do things on my own, they pushed me out of the ring they built." He leaned back and looked up at the soft gray sky. "Dean said that by keeping Andrew at the center, the company would survive another generation. He thought you would accept a backstage role. They don't understand. The ones who step back aren't weak. They are watching." I folded the papers and tucked them carefully into my bag. I'm tired of holding myself together in silence. I used to believe hard work and honesty would be seen. But honesty has no value to people who only count gains. He nodded. "Then you are no longer the pawn. From now on you hold the board." I squeezed his shoulder gently, then stood. "I will protect everything you left behind. Not for blood, but for the hundreds of people whose lives depend on this company. For the values you put above profit." He smiled, a rare smile without bitterness. "Don't let kindness slow you down. Kindness is strength if you know when to wield it." I left his house as the sun had already set. The sky turned deep indigo, no stars, no moon. Only the headlights of cars cut across the road ahead. I didn't look back. Each step I took now was steady. I thought of the company fund that had been used to cover wrongdoing. Of employees who had missed holiday bonuses because of budget adjustments. Of investments delayed so Andrew could enjoy himself without accountability. If they thought I was a compliant pawn, they had misjudged me. For this game, I would not let them keep building on lies. I would not destroy it. I would turn the board over, and make them face the moves they thought they controlled. The next morning I returned to Emily's office with the documents my grandfather had signed and the certificate of capacity from the independent physician. The certainty in her eyes when she opened the file was not triumphal. It was the steady certainty of a legal foundation that could not be denied. Emily arranged everything into a single large file and closed the lid, breathing out slowly. "We can bring this before the board at any time. If they don't react fast enough, Gabriella, you will be the only one withstanding to call a special meeting. But there's one more thing." I looked up. "What?" She handed me a silver USB drive. "Linda just stopped by." "Linda?" "My family's former housekeeper. She's retired, but she kept in touch with Harold." I held the USB in my hand, feeling a strange flutter. Linda had cared for me since high school. When our parents traveled, she cooked simple meals, tied my hair when I fell asleep over my studies, and was the only person in that house who ever asked softly, "Are you okay?" "How did she find you?" I asked. "She came on her own. She said she can't stay silent anymore after seeing what's been happening." Emily plugged the USB into another laptop. She quietly backed up documents before Dean ordered them destroyed. Some accounting records, some internal HR files, and there are even audio recordings. I stared at the screen. My heart seemed to stop for a beat when a series of folders, clearly labeled by date, appeared. Emily opened an audio file. My father's voice filled the room, deep but unmistakably cold. "Just tell him the documents were lost because of a system error. Linda, you just do as I say. Burn everything Harold kept and I'll arrange a separate pension for you. You won't lose anything." Pause. Then Linda's voice, trembling but clear. "I've worked in this house 26 years, Dean. I didn't burn anything of Harold's while he was alive. If you want it gone, do it yourself. The sound of a chair scraping, footsteps. Then the recording ended. I sat there in silence, clutching the USB as if it might vanish. She kept everything. And more, Emily said, switching to another folder. These are scans of the altered financial documents. Linda found the originals in the old safe in the basement. Dean thought they had been destroyed during the office renovation. I flipped through a series of files. Transfer slips, board minutes, letters from legal counsel with forged signatures. There were even old reports I had written, altered before being presented to the board. My name was still on them, but the content had been changed, from the figures to the recommendations. Emily pushed her chair back and poured me a glass of water. Linda says she never intended to keep documents. But after she saw Andrew being announced as CEO and you disappearing without explanation, she understood things had gone too far. I took a sip, then asked softly, "Where is she?" "She's downstairs. She wants to see you." I stood, a childlike flutter rising in my chest at the thought of finding something long lost. Walking down the narrow hall, I saw Linda seated in a gray upholstered chair, wearing her pale green cardigan and the wool scarf she always wrapped around herself in cold weather. She looked up, eyes warm like the winters when I used to study at the family kitchen table. "You've grown up," she said with a small smile. No more the girl with a backpack too big for her. I sat opposite her and squeezed her hand gently. "Why did you do it?" She smiled, but her eyes were serious. "Because you were the only one in that house who never pretended. When you were 12 and your mother scolded you before a party for wearing the wrong color dress, you bowed and apologized without protest. But that evening you quietly gave the birthday cake slice to the new maid. When your father was cold to Harold over the share dispute, you were the only one who made him tea and sat with him for the whole afternoon." She squeezed my hand and her voice dropped. "That household, everyone performed. But you didn't. And the ones who do not perform deserve to be protected." I was quiet for a long moment, then said softly, "I won't let them destroy everything Harold built. But I also don't want to become like them, taking power by destroying others." Linda nodded. "That's why Harold trusted you." I squeezed her hand again. "I need you to stand as a witness when the time comes. Will you do it?" "I've been ready since the moment Dean ordered me to burn your grandfather's papers." I rose and returned with her to the conference room. Emily was waiting, looking at Linda with visible respect. "We now have an internal witness, the original documents that were erased, and an audio recording that proves coercion," Emily said. "Gabriella, you are no longer passive." I looked at the two women before me, one family, one keeper of my childhood memories, and realized I was not alone. With a USB, a quiet refusal, and a set of files saved from fire, I had what Dean never expected me to have: the truth. And people willing to defend it to the end. That Wednesday evening I returned to my parents' estate just after dusk. The house sat on a hill west of the city, its ivory walls and towering stone columns always giving an impression of power and control. From the side parking lot I peered through the living room window. Soft yellow light spilled out. My mother sat by the hearth leafing through a magazine. Everything looked peaceful, as if nothing had broken. I did not knock at the front door. I used the old way in, the kitchen door I used when I came home late from school. I remembered the sunken tile by the threshold, the same creaky hinge. I moved lightly down the hall, as quiet as a memory returning to reclaim what had been taken. My father's study door was locked. But Linda had given me the old key she kept as insurance. I fitted the key into the lock and turned it gently. The mechanism felt the same as ever. The door opened and a smell of old wood and leather hit me like a familiar face. The room was exactly as it had been. A large walnut desk, bookshelves lining the walls, a brass pendulum clock standing sentinel in the center, witness to countless secret negotiations. I turned on the desk lamp, careful not to flip the main switch that would throw light into the hallway. Then I started. I opened each drawer. In the left one, among sticky notes and client contracts, I found an unlabeled brown leather file. I opened it and my eyes stopped at the title: Transfer Agreement, Class B Share Fund, Internal Trust Arrangement. My name appeared in the document. But the signature was not mine. And the date matched the day I was at a conference in Dallas. I remembered clearly. That night I returned late to my hotel and I still had the confirmation email and schedule. I photographed the document and continued searching. Another stack lay in the pen drawer, tucked between old budget plans. It was account statements from the company's internal accounts, with payment vouchers to a firm called Westbridge Consulting. I searched the name on my phone. No official website, no clear address. But when I clicked a link from the corporate registration, the director listed was Andrew Moore. I wasn't surprised. I only felt a heavier weight, as if all my doubts had been confirmed and required no further imagination. I was taking photos of one last file when I heard footsteps in the corridor. I froze. The footsteps were decisive and loud. Then the sound of the doorknob turning. I had no time to hide. I straightened as the door swung open. My father filled the doorway, his tall frame blotting the light behind him. He wore a pale blue shirt and held a glass of wine. His eyes darkened when he saw me standing in the office, a stack of papers still in my hands. "Gabriella," he said, his voice low, not angry but cold. "What are you doing in here?" I held his gaze. "Getting back what belongs to me." He stepped inside and closed the door behind him. "This is private property. You have no right to rummage." I erased the page I had just photographed. "Then what is this?" "A transfer agreement in my name, signed the day I was in another state." "Who signed for me?" "Our forged signatures, now legal assets." His eyes narrowed. He put down his glass and came closer, his voice dropping into a threatening tone. "You are going too far, Gabriella. Don't forget you're part of this family." I took half a step back but did not look away. "No. I'm no longer part of any family performance. I'm not afraid of your warnings anymore. I have seen enough to understand your promises were meant to keep me exactly where you wanted. Silent, devoted, and replaceable." He closed the distance. "What are you going to do? Destroy things? Run to the press? March to that old man and demand a piece of the pie?" I smiled, but my expression stayed even. "Grandpa just signed over full medical and financial authority to me. He has a physician's certificate of competence. I copied everything you were hiding. I have the recording of your conversation with Linda. I'm not here to demand a piece. I'm here to reclaim what you took." My father's face stiffened. The calm that usually masked him seemed to erode. His lips compressed and his gaze dropped, as if recalculating every move. "You will regret this," he said slowly. "Not legally. You will regret that you will have no one left in this family by your side." I nodded, voice low. "That's something I've learned to accept a long time ago. I have stood alone for 10 years. There is nothing left to lose unless there is something you have not yet done." I slipped past him, phone full of photographed documents clutched in my hand. As my fingers touched the doorknob, I heard him call, smaller and offbeat, "Gabriella." I turned. He stood there with a hand on the edge of the desk, and for a moment his expression was not regret but surprise, as if he had just seen something he'd never expected. His daughter was no longer the one who shrank into corners. I held his gaze for a few seconds, then opened the door and walked out into the hallway, closing the heavy wood behind me. Behind that door the office remained quiet, as if no conversation had taken place. But I knew he had realized the most important thing: he no longer controlled the board. The next morning, waking in Emily's apartment, the fragile peace shattered. My phone buzzed endlessly. On screen, bank alerts scrolled. "Your account has been temporarily frozen pending a security review." Another message read, "Please contact legal to verify the source of funds." I tried to log into my company email. The password was rejected. After 3 attempts, the result was the same. A cold message appeared. "Your account has been disabled by executive order." I sat still, phone heavy in my hand like a stone. All familiar paths were blocked in a single night. Emily emerged from the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and set one down without asking. "They froze everything?" she asked. I nodded, my voice low. "Even my personal bank. They're trying to leave me nowhere to maneuver." Emily put a hand on my shoulder. "We prepared for this possibility. But you must stay calm. Don't react emotionally, that's what they want." At that moment, another alert popped up. I opened it. A major financial news site had just published an article. The headline read in bold, "Gabriella Moore under investigation for financial misconduct at Moore Legacy Resorts." Below was a poorly doctored photo of me from a past anniversary, cropped to make me appear distant and cold. The article listed unfounded allegations. misuse of project funds, fabricated invoices to withdraw money. Each line felt like a blade to the reputation I had built over a decade of hard work. I bit my lip until it stung, the taste of blood metallic on my tongue. Emily leaned in and exhaled. This was intentional. They want the public to see you as the family traitor. They want you isolated before you can speak. And they succeeded in part, I murmured. My phone is full of messages from former colleagues. Some ask if I'm on the run. Others just send question mark emojis. Emily pulled another file from the drawer. Then we make this apartment our battleground. Think simply, they went first with the press, so we go first with the law. We set to work. The living room became a maze of documents. The dining table piled high with bank statements, contracts, correspondence. On the wall, Emily taped a flowchart linking shell companies and arrows showing suspicious transfers. Linda stopped by carrying additional HR files and set them on the table, her expression grave. They assume I'm an old housekeeper who can't read numbers, she said. But I saw how they redirected staff payroll into phantom expenses no one monitored. Here's a photocopy from 3 years ago. My throat tightened as I took her hand. You're not just the housekeeper. You're our most important witness. She smiled faintly and sat down beside me. I have nothing left to lose. But you have a future. We worked through the morning. I reviewed every document, photographed and uploaded copies to secure drives. Emily drafted sworn statements. Colin stopped by in the afternoon with a bank attestation proving I never authorized the disputed withdrawals. This is our weapon, Colin said. That article is smoke. We need to turn the evidence into fire, large enough to burn down the theater they built. I looked at him. Do you think they will stop? Or will they invent more? They won't stop. But every wrong move leaves a trace. Your job is to patiently gather all those traces together. In the evening, while the team took a short break, I stepped out onto the balcony and looked down at the steady stream of cars below. A cold wind swept by, carrying the smell of gasoline and the city's damp air. I held my phone and scrolled through unread messages. One was from an unknown number. Gabriella, stop before it's too late. Sometimes silence is the only way to stay safe. I read that message again and again, a chill running through me. Who sent it? Andrew? My father? Or someone I knew on the board? I took a screenshot and sent it to Emily. He called back right away. Don't delete it. That could be evidence. Someone inside is trying to intimidate you, and that's a mistake on their part. I leaned against the railing and looked up at the night sky. The high-rise buildings threw orange-yellow light onto the clouds, like a painted backdrop. I wondered how many years I had lived hoping for one word of recognition from my parents, and now the only thing they had given me was denial and defamation. Yet amid all this chaos, I no longer felt small. When I returned to the table, Linda had dozed off in a chair with a stack of files still in her hands. Emily and Colin were still talking in low, determined voices. Seeing them, my chest warmed a little. I was not alone. I would turn this apartment into a base, where I would prepare for an uncompromising confrontation. I picked up a pen and wrote on the first blank sheet. They started the war. I will end it. Emily and I sat for hours in her cramped living room, piles of files spread across the old wooden table. Her small apartment had become a true strategy room. On the wall were relationship diagrams Emily had drawn with a marker, subsidiary names, bank accounts, and streams of money looping through anonymous funds and reappearing as consulting fees. Emily flipped through an old document she had just found in the corporate formation files. Gabriella, look at this. She tapped a small aged clause, nearly overlooked for half a century. In the event that executive leadership or a principal shareholder is found to have engaged in financial fraud or violations of ethical standards, the associated rights and shares shall be immediately revoked and returned to the lawful heir or to a board-appointed designee. I read it slowly, each word cutting through the haze like sunlight. This clause, they can't erase it. Emily nodded. This is the key. We don't only have evidence that Dean and Andrew siphoned money, we now have the basis to force the board to strip them of their positions. I gripped the edge of the table, a flicker of hope mixed with anxiety rising in me. But Grandpa must support me. If he doesn't, the board could still side with my parents. She laid a hand over mine. Harold is tired of being marginalized. This is his chance to choose who will guard his legacy. That afternoon I went back to his house. Harold sat in his study, late-day light slanting across his lined face, but his eyes remained bright. I set the file on the desk and opened the page with the clause for him to read. He read silently, then looked up at me, his gaze heavy. I thought this clause was just a bureaucratic formality I'd never need, he said. I was wrong. They betrayed the values I built this company on. I answered quietly, if you want, you can sign over your shares to me. That way, when we present evidence of fraud, I can protect the company without being obstructed. He picked up a pen, his fingers trembling slightly but his eyes resolute. Gabriella, I have waited for this day a long time. I am not signing this because you are my granddaughter. I am signing because you are the only one who still believes in decency among a flock of vultures. The ink made a bold mark on the paper, a seal on half a lifetime of work. I sat beside him, looking at that hand trembling but firm, my chest tightening. After he signed, he held my hand and his voice dropped. Don't think only of defeating Dean. Think of the people who depend on this place. They are the real future of the company. I nodded, eyes stinging. That evening Linda came to Emily's apartment. She brought a worn leather-bound notebook and a thick bundle of envelopes. Gently, she set the notebook in front of me. This is the journal I kept for years. The exact dates when Dean burned documents, what papers, and the circumstances. I knew one day this would be needed. I opened it. Her handwriting was neat, every date precise. March 14th. Dean asked me to take a stack of contracts out back and burn them. I secretly backed them up first. Each page was living evidence, incontestable. Linda handed over an envelope. These are the original documents I copied. I hid them under the laundry room floorboards for years. No one found them. I looked up at her, gratitude welling. You saved not only me but this whole company. She smiled gently, her eyes bright. I just did what I had to do. I lived in that house my whole life and I've seen enough. Now I want the truth to come out. Emily organized the journal and the documents into the legal file. Linda, will you be willing to testify if needed? Of course. I have nothing left to fear. The room fell quiet for a few seconds, the only sounds the flip of paper and the wind outside the window. My anxiety still churned beneath the surface, but underneath it was an unshakable steadiness. I looked at Emily, at Linda, and remembered Harold's signature earlier that day. The final puzzle pieces were falling into place. I was not alone. We began preparing our strategy. Emily assigned tasks. I would review all electronic evidence. Colin would prepare the civil complaint and petition the board to convene an emergency meeting. Linda would be our witness. Harold, as a major shareholder, would formally request a board investigation into Dean and Andrew's conduct. When night fell, the living room glowed with desk lamps and stacks of papers. I taped 3 words to the wall on a large sheet: Truth wins. Staring at them, I felt the flame inside me grow steadier. A battle was coming and I had gathered my most loyal allies. My grandfather, Emily, Colin, and Linda. The board they had built was no longer a place to push me to the margins. This time I was arranging the final pieces for a decisive strike. That morning I walked into the headquarters of Moore Legacy Resorts, once the pride of our family, with steady steps and a pounding heart. The grand lobby gleamed under towering glass, but to me it felt cold, like a theater where my family had staged countless plays. The receptionist rose and froze at the sight of me and the group behind me. Emily in a gray suit clutching the files, Colin with a carrier of documents, and 4 silent FBI agents filing in behind us. No introductions needed. We're going straight up to the 12th floor, Emily said softly, her voice authoritative. The boardroom door opened. Inside, the board members sat along the long, polished walnut table. Dean, my father, presided at the head. Elena sat to his right, her face carefully made up, eyes flashing when she saw me. Andrew stood at the far end, pouring water and smiling politely to a board member. His smile vanished the moment he saw who had come with me. The room felt heavy. I stood straight, set the document bag on the table and spoke clearly. I have documents to present to the full board, and before representatives of the federal government. One of the FBI agents put his badge on the table and spoke plainly. We are here to observe and verify the information provided. Any attempt to obstruct this process will be dealt with under federal law. A murmur rose immediately. Dean tried to keep his tone calm, though his jaw tightened. Gabriella, what do you think you're doing? This is a private company meeting, not a venue for a personal spectacle. I opened the first file and laid out the bank statements and forged contracts in front of each person. Here is conclusive evidence of unauthorized withdrawals from the trust in my name, $3 million in total. These transfers were moved in small increments through the shell company Westbridge Consulting, whose listed director is Andrew Moore. The funds then reappeared as consulting fees. A board member leaned in, scrutinizing the numbers, frowning. This statement has bank endorsements. It can't be fabricated. Dean slammed his fist on the table. They're just internal financial adjustments. There's nothing illegal. I brought out the second file. This is the insurance documentation for the April car accident. The official report lists a trial driver as responsible, but traffic camera footage shows Andrew driving. The victim was hospitalized and the settlement was paid from company funds, a use of corporate assets to cover a personal wrongdoing. Andrew's face flushed. He lunged for the papers. Don't slander me. You have nothing but cheap photocopies. At that moment, an FBI agent stepped forward and put another file on the table. We have originals from the local police department and copies of the actual camera footage. The settlement was hidden under extra-legal legal adjustments in operating expenses. This supports charges of bribery and cover-up. The room erupted. Andrew raged, but his voice wavered and the confidence he usually wore slipped away. This is a conspiracy. You're all conspiring. I said nothing and moved to the third folder. These are altered board minutes. Harold's signature was pasted in. The meeting dates coincide with periods when he was receiving treatment in Florida. And here is Linda's journal. She worked for the family for 26 years and recorded the dates and times Dean ordered documents burned. Linda has copies of the original records. Linda entered the room followed by Harold. She set the leather-bound notebook on the table and stared directly at Dean. I was there. You told me to take Harold's papers out back and burn them. I kept them instead. The room fell into a heavy silence. All eyes turned to Dean. His face tightened, sweat beaded at his temple. Elena pressed her lips together but said nothing. At that moment Harold entered, leaning on his cane. The room went still. He moved slowly to the table and placed a hand on my shoulder. I, Harold Moore, founder of this company, affirm that my daughter and my son-in-law have concealed, defrauded, and betrayed my legacy. I hereby transfer all my shares, more than 45%, to Gabriella Moore. She is the only one fit to lead. Chairs scraped. Board members exchanged looks, many nodding at his words. Dean leapt to his feet, red-faced. You can't do this. You're being manipulated by this girl. You're not of sound mind. Harold turned, his voice ringing though hoarse. I am clearer now than I've ever been, Dean. Clear enough to see I was wrong to trust you. A board member stood up, his voice grave. In light of everything presented, I move that we immediately vote to remove Dean Moore, Elena Moore, and Andrew Moore from all positions in the company. Hands went up in sequence. 6, 7, 8, all in agreement. The board chair brought down the gavel. The motion carries. Effective immediately, Gabriella Moore is the new Chief Executive Officer of Moore Legacy Resorts. I stood still, breath quick, looking around the room. Dean stepped back, his expression stunned. Elena covered her face, her makeup streaked. Andrew hung his head, his usual arrogance gone. Beside me, Harold stood, old but with eyes that shone with a faith that had never been extinguished. In that moment I understood that the sacrifices and the years of being dismissed had led to this instant. I was no longer being pushed to the margins. I stood at the center, holding truth and authority with the board's recognition. And most importantly, I no longer feared my father's presence. The next day, the press ran the story. Dean and Elena Moore and their son Andrew are officially under federal investigation for financial fraud and tax concealment. Images of the three of them leaving the FBI building with strained faces were plastered across newspapers and evening news shows. Personal assets were frozen. Lavish investments, from beachfront estates to yachts, were sealed pending investigation. Faces that had once smiled confidently in public now looked downcast, avoiding the cameras. Meanwhile, I had a more important task, standing before the entire workforce of Moore Legacy Resorts. It was the company's first all-staff meeting after the upheaval, and I knew everyone was looking at me with a range of emotions: worry, confusion, even skepticism. When I stepped up to the podium, I paused for a moment to really take in each face. These were people who had given their lives to this company, many of whom had been there since Harold's day. I began in a calm, steady voice. I understand the past days have made us all uneasy. My family committed serious wrongs. But their mistakes do not define this company. You are the true heart of More Legacy Resorts. The room went quiet except for the soft rustle of pens. I continued, "Today I am announcing a profit-sharing program for every employee. From now on, you will receive a fair share in the company's success. This is not a gift. It is recognition for the work you all do." There was a murmur and a few wide-eyed looks of disbelief. I followed with another announcement. "I am also establishing the Harold Moore Scholarship Fund for employees' children. My grandfather always believed education is the greatest asset, and I want that belief to live on." Harold, seated in the front row, brightened and gripped his cane, unable to hide his emotion. I closed with a promise. "Effective immediately, we will adjust wages for our service staff. No one here should work 12 hours a day and still not make ends meet. You deserve stable lives. Not because we are a hotel company, but because we are a family in the truest sense." The auditorium erupted into applause. Faces that had been tense softened, eyes glistened. Some people bowed their heads to wipe away tears. I felt a weight lift from my chest even as it grew heavier, like a stone finally taken off after years of bearing it. The following day, maintenance removed the large portraits of Dean and Elena from the main lobby. The gilded frame was quietly taken down in front of dozens of employees. The company curator unveiled a new photograph, Harold beaming next to me at last year's Christmas celebration. When the new image was hung, the space seemed to brighten, as if affirming that the legacy belongs to those who keep their integrity. A year passed. More Legacy Resorts recovered faster than anyone expected. New branches in Miami and Boston not only stabilized but grew significantly. The company appeared in numerous business magazines with headlines like, "Turnaround Success Under New Leadership." I was invited to accept Entrepreneur of the Year. When I stepped onto the stage, lights blazing and applause filling the hall, I held the crystal trophy and said, "Success is not only measured by revenue or profit, but by building a place where people feel valued." I share this award with every employee of More Legacy Resorts, the people who made miracles happen in a year of storms. Harold sat in the front row, eyes rimmed, smiling with pride. Emily, Colin, and Linda were there too, pillars standing solidly behind me. Yet amid the celebration, a surprise arrived. One afternoon at the office, the secretary handed me a beige envelope with a familiar handwritten address. I opened it and found a long letter. "Sister Gabriella, I am writing from the rehabilitation facility. After everything I had to face myself, I realize I cannot keep living the way I did. I want to start over, not leaning on the Moore name but by my own hands. I plan to open a small restaurant that offers second chances. For former inmates, people in recovery, women who have suffered abuse. I learned this from you, from the fact that you never gave up, from the way you rebuilt when everything fell apart. I am not asking for your forgiveness. I only hope that one day you will come to that restaurant, and if you see that I have truly changed, you might call me your brother again. Andrew." I held the letter and stared at the shaky handwriting, feeling a complex ache in my chest. So many wounds remained open. So many lies made it impossible to forgive easily. Yet a faint image of the boy who once stood on a brick behind me to appear taller resurfaced. I set the letter on the table and sat very still for a long time. In the twilight streaming through the office window, I wondered, can a bond be repaired after betrayal, or should one cherish the family one chooses instead? The answer remained open, like a chapter yet to be written. I want to hear your thoughts. If it were you, after everything that happened, would you open your heart and give a second chance, or keep your distance to protect yourself? Leave your opinion below. Every comment helps us understand more deeply the meaning of family and trust. If you're interested in real-life stories filled with upheaval, lessons about betrayal, resilience, and new beginnings, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future episodes. I believe that somewhere in these stories, each of us will find a reflection of our own life.